And so, yeah, welcome everyone to our roundtable discussion. And just a reminder that this is a part of a bigger event, which we have organized for the third time. High School of Economics, Doctoral School in Art and Design, and Art and Design School are organizing this big event, conference, theories and practices of art and design, social, cultural, economic, and political contexts. And actually, right from the start of the doctoral program, which is based at Art and Design School, and very closely connected with it, we started to talk about education and different formats, mostly on the level of PhD. So we have had a few roundtable discussions, panel discussions on the subject, and some of you have already participated in those. And today is yet another meeting, and we would like to slightly, widen the horizons because it involves so many topics, it involves so many different aspects. Well, we have a lot of participants, and I will just mention the names, and so that, yes, you can see that we are all here. So we have with us Deputy Dean of the Department of Media, Communication and Design, Tatiana Rivchun, today, who's been very supportive of this doctoral school, and also this idea to develop different formats of PhD research, and not only. This is something we're going to talk about later. So we also have our colleagues, Jenna Rossi-Camus, who is today with us and will share her own experience doing PhD by practice. We have also Claire Baker with us, who is doing her PhD at the moment, and she will be able to share her own experience here. So we have Ekaterina Sharova from Tromsø with us today as well, who will be talking about her very rich and interesting experience of curating different art projects. And actually, she will focus on the way she tries to also organize very rich and thought through educational programs in the frame of Arctic Art Forum, which has been held from 2016 and until actually 2020, but it's an ongoing project. So we also have Irina Sakhno with us, who is professor at High School of Economics, and she's been very much involved in the work of our doctoral school, and we've just done a paper together with Irina Sakhno and our other colleague Tatiana Fadeeva, who is with us today as well, and will be sharing her own experience and her own actually practice, and I would say practice advising, being an academic advisor to our PhD student. And it will be a very unique, peek into the way academic advisor can collaborate with his student, PhD student, and what we can, have as a result of this collaboration. Very productive, I guess. So we also have so yes, and together with Irina and Tatiana, we've just published an article in which we speak about this, search for new formats by our doctoral school. We'll be probably sharing a bit about this later. We have Alena Papina with us, who is our PhD student, third year PhD student, who has a very rich experience in actually participating in different formats. Alena's research is focused on site-specific performances, and she's herself a practitioner and a theorist. So it's a combination of two, which fascinates us all those who are here in this participating in this roundtable discussion. So yeah, I think we only lack Olga Roginskaya, but maybe she will join us later. She is the curator of a newly opened MA program in theater and and performance, which is a combination of theories and practices. And this is one of probably performance is one of the formats in which this combination seems most, natural, I would say. But let's see how it goes. I'd like to, yes, to actually hand a microphone to Tatiana Rivchun, with whom we actually started to discuss alternative formats 4 years ago when we just started to think about PhD program. And Tatiana was very supportive right from the beginning. And I'd like to, yes, to ask her why it actually made you so assured that apart from strictly academic, academic nature of work, which we are so much accustomed to, you produce 200 pages and you are already a PhD, of course, after a successful defense. What makes us, those who work in the field of art and design, different?
Thank you very much, Liudmila. The issue is I have a great problem. Which language to speak?
Well, I think this is what we discussed already. I think those who feel it much comfortable to speak in Russian will speak Russian. Those who feel they can speak in English, they will speak English.
Okay,
just my question is very simple. Our Russian-speaking colleagues, can you follow the translation? Those who don't want to rely on the language only, is it possible to follow the translation? I think it should be okay. Yes. Okay, yeah.
Okay, so then I will start speaking English if something happens, or if someone asks me to speak Russian, I will just turn to Russian. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And I'm happy that we are having the discussion today. And I'm happy that 4 years ago, we started the doctorate school. I'm happy in general to see you all and discuss education in art and design. Though, in fact, I was going to talk today a little bit a different thing, because now we have a different challenge and we are thinking about going further. So, we in High School of Economics, starting from the beginning, when we reach some step and we understand that we are okay, we go further. So I think that with our doctorate school, everything is already very good. Because we opened it, we have a lot of students, we have a lot of people who want to study at our doctorate school. I think that we have very good, interesting, and very professional academic advisors. And we have brilliant colleagues and partners like you all here, with whom we can discuss different issues in art and design. From the beginning, we were asking ourselves, what is the difference between the work, the PhD work in art and design, and, for example, the PhD work in economics? And that was the issue. And we tried to answer it. And I think that in a way we managed to answer it. At least we managed to turn thinking people in High School of Economics who are economists, managers, and lawyers, that in art and design, we have something which all people call PhD by practice. And we try to do this also, though it is not so easy. But what I wanted to ask you all today is a little bit different question. It's also about education, but a little bit different type of education. So now in Russia, we are talking about founding the professional degrees. So at the moment, we have PhD degree in art and design, and we're happy about this. The question is to go along the road which most countries went, having the doctors of design, which is not PhD, yeah, but which is doctors in design. We have, and it is quite popular, the format of MBA and DBA and DPA, and everyone knows in Russia very well these degrees, which are not scientific, but more professional ones. But in Russia, there are no doctorate degrees in design and doctorate degrees in art. Now I have a question. Do my Russian colleagues understand what I'm talking about?
Unfortunately, yeah? We do.
Okay, so we started discussing it on the level of our Ministry of Education. And Liudmila knows, because we discussed with her a lot about that. At the moment, I don't have quite clear understanding what is the advantage of having 2 tracks. So one track is more or less research and scientific work, yeah, which is PhD, and the other track, which is professional development and the professional growth, which is this D, Doctor in Design and Doctor in Art, for example. So we originally in Russia didn't have that, but we had very strong unions, which is in Russian it's called Союзы. Союзы художников, Союзы архитекторов, Союзы дизайнеров. The unions of designers, unions of artists, and unions of architects, for example, yeah, which is closer to design and art. And these unions were very strong in Soviet times. They were giving people, artists and designers, quite a lot of benefits. People could have the special places for working, because they didn't work, most of them didn't have some special work, but they could create their, do their activities in these places which were given by these unions. They were allowed to organize several exhibitions a year, and so on and so forth. Now we also have these unions, but they are not as strong as they were in the Soviet times. So the question is, if I don't know, in fact, whether in other countries, in European or in the States or in Asian countries, there exist the unions of artists and designers and architects, and this is the first question. And if they do exist, what are their tasks? What are they doing, and why people join these unions? But the question is about our way. I mean, the way in Russia, whether to create and to start doing these programs for doctors of design and doctors of art. And if again, and more questions about, if we do this, what is the difference in the academic teaching, academic studying in, for example, the doctorate school of art and design, and in doctorate school of design for being the doctor of design, but not PhD in design. I know that it was not the presentation, but it was more questions. But it is really something which now makes me worrying and makes me thinking all days and nights about this. So if someone has to say something on this, I would be very thankful.
Well, I think that the idea was, yes, we would speak about PhD by practice more, but yeah.
But this is very close. This is very close to PhD by practice.
Close but different. Ekaterina wanted to say something, I guess.
Yes, I think I'll just comment, because I think it's a very interesting question, because I have experience both from Norway and from Russia, and the difference is really huge, because in Norway, I mean, I have a feeling that in Norway, you have many things from USSR. Like the unions are very strong, and I'm myself a member of the Norwegian Association of Curators. It's a new union. It's established just for several years ago. And Kunsthistorisk Forening is like Art History Association Norway, which has been there for at least 100 years. And especially the Norwegian Association of Curators, they do political work. So it's a political work, and it's about payment. It's about conversation with the parliament. It's about, like, for instance, now in the Corona times, there were many meetings on a political level. But if we're talking about artists, there are very strong unions. Norske Billedkunstnere. It's like Norwegian Association of Artists, and Unge Kunstnersamfunn, Young Artists of Norway. And both of them, they're very strong and really visible. But I think that it's also difficult to compare Russia and Norway, because Norway is much smaller and it's much easier to organize people when you are just like 6-7 million people, and the territory is much smaller. But I think also it's about decentralization in the country and education, because the educational methods, they start in kindergarten, basically, like social competence, group work. It has been there on all levels of education. I have been working also in the education in Norway, and I think this is something which is different. In Russia, it's more about division. It's more about like the social aspect, the group aspect is not there. And I think this was a challenge when I worked in Arkhangelsk recently, because we were attempting to unite cultural workers. I didn't try to make a union, but at least to have a meeting place for them. But you see that there are like lacks, there are gaps in the education from before. People should learn to communicate in order to establish a professional group which will be strong enough to have their say in any like cultural political issue. And just another thing I wanted to say, I think when we talk about research, another difference is that you have this knowledge production, but in order for this knowledge to be implemented into a policy, we also need this kind of links between universities and those who actually take decisions, because like the recent program in Комфортная городская среда, comfortable city space in Russia, I saw that it's not necessarily led by professionals. Like in Arkhangelsk, the politician who does this program, he has education in military, he has education in police. So when I was inviting him to my events, he just never met up because he didn't find it relevant for him. And we brought like a delegation from Norway, representatives of each designer union, by the way. So it was very interesting experience. Yeah, so that's a comment from me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think, yeah, just this idea of understanding actually and speaking the same language between different spheres of society and layers of society is important. It's about also collaboration and it's about the connections between universities and political structures and universities which prepare students and then the employers. So there should be always about connections. Otherwise, there are gaps. So talking about the connections and mostly about connections between theory and practice. The question which Tatiana raised about these different actually PhDs, I think this is relevant maybe in the context of the UK. As far as I know, in the UK, they also have different types of PhDs, and you can be Doctor of Design, you can do PhD by practice, or you can do just a regular PhD. And we have at least a couple of colleagues who can comment on this and explain if there is any difference, because there is, of course. Jenna has recently, not so recently already, actually, yes. Yeah, 2 years ago, oh my gosh. Yes, 2 years ago, successfully received PhD by practice. And could you just explain what the structure of work and how is it organized? Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. And I'm really glad to be part of this conversation. I think both as a student and an educator, and of course, a practitioner and an academic, creative practitioner and academic. So just for context, I earned my PhD at the University of the Arts, London College of Fashion, within the research hub and of the Center for Fashion Curation, which is unique in the world. And I had done my MA there as well. So at University of the Arts, not just at LCF, but certainly you'll be familiar with Central St. Martin's, Chelsea, etc. We do have a long tradition and culture of PhD by practice. So I can't really comment on Doctor of Design. I'm actually not aware if it's an option, and it's not at LCF. It might be at London College of Communication. But even at the time when I was doing my PhD and engaging with students from Chelsea and CSM, there was even a student doing his PhD about the history of doing PhD by practice in fine arts at Chelsea. So we was already at a period since the 1980s to even be reflective about this pathway. And having come from an MA also, where at the MA dissertation, which of course is an academic requirement in the UK, but in certain pathways like my own fashion curation, the dissertation requirement was smaller in the word count, but a significant piece of practical work had to be submitted. And in our case, it was an exhibition proposal that had to have a significant visual or material manifestation. So that model was scaled up when the Center for Fashion Curation was initiated in 2014. And at that time, there was only one other PhD student who was doing a fashion curatorial practice-based PhD, and that's Dr. Jeff Horsley, who's now one of the directors and a postdoctoral candidate, postdoctoral researcher at the center. So I think that for me, this was always a way, something that I was aware of, and probably if there wasn't a practice-based PhD, I would never have ventured to do one. And as well, my partner, who's was in theater and performance studies, he earned a practice-based PhD in the UK between Royal Holloway and I'm blanking, but this idea actually was first known to me about PhD by practice through drama and performance studies. So that was my first awareness, and I'm interested to hear about the performance pathways in Russia. So yeah.
Actually,
yeah.
To speak about performance a lot today, because it's very interesting, yes, how we when we just started, and I remember when Alena came, to not even to study, but just questioning if she was going to join us. And at that point, we started already to think that PhD isn't enough. So it seems like there should be something else. And then we came to this PhD by practice. And for us, it's now only something we are discussing. It doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
This is somewhere we would like to move to.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, I think in terms of issues, things that I was aware of from friends and colleagues doing PhD by practice in other disciplines, and it does as well perhaps impact more significantly on the fine art and design. But I remember quite a lot of conversation about the means of assessment for the practical work. So obviously, when the way that PhD supervision teams are constructed, any practice-based student, certainly at UAL, we would be encouraged to have a director of studies and a first supervisor, maybe one working more with theory and one more with practice, and that should be mirrored in the examination team for the defense. So I think that I've been told by a number of people that probably I was the most fortunate in this team, because my director of studies is Dr. Agnes Rocamora, and she had never supervised a practice-based or a curatorial PhD before. And my other supervisor was Professor Judith Clark, who's an exhibition maker who you may be familiar with. And similarly for my the curation of my examination team also was super I'm just honored and privileged to have Professor Caroline Evans as my internal supervisor, my internal examiner for UAL, and Kat Debo from MOMU as the external. So there was always had to be the balance of someone to be able to assess on the term of the theory and the practice. And our regulations as well, there's still, it's a lot for those of you who are, trying to plan how to create a program. There has to be so much flexibility. Although there's a regulation in word count, for me, my written portion could have been between, I think, 35,000 to 80,000 words. And although I did 70,000, and there was also written component in the practical part, this was a choice. So because there's so many forms of practice, there are people doing screenwriting, or it's a bit of a different balance if you're producing a series of paintings, a film, a fashion collection, etc.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna. We have comment from Jeline in our chat box. Canadian American perspective. Thank you, Jolene. Yes, also about the formats of PhDs which are available. I know just following Norwegian experience that Nordics are quite let's say adventurous in this, because they have very experimental ways and very experimental formats. Sometimes, yes, PhD by practice is just a performance, and that's enough. So you just write maybe some rationale, and so it's interesting also to look in that direction. But I have this question to Claire, who is in the process right now. Claire, what about this balance in your work? Do you have to offer 50% of artistic work and 50% of research? What is it in your case?
Right, in my case, I'm in my second year at Northumbria University in the UK, and I can understand completely what Jenna's saying. My discipline is textiles. I'm in the School of Design, and my PhD is in fashion, which is kind of a little bit strange when you know what I actually do. But in terms of the practice-based situation, officially, we are supposed to produce 50% theoretical writing work and 50% creative works, whatever that might be. So in my case, it's kind of textile artworks. But in reality, that would mean that our thesis should be 40,000 words instead of the 80,000 words of a purely theoretical student. But as Jenna said, when it comes to feeding back on creative work, assessing the creative part of the work, sometimes it happens that the examiner isn't able to do that because they're from a completely different discipline. So I found that along with the creative outputs, I have to write about them and explain it in words for it to be assessed. And I think art and design, as you know, is very subjective anyway. So there is a little bit of concern, really, because like my supervisor is a practitioner, my primary supervisor. She's a jewellery maker and she's great, but most of the feedback and critical advice, I guess, is about the written part of the work. And it was the same when I did an MFA at Manchester. Nobody seemed to care what the quality of the creative work was like. It didn't matter, it was about the idea. So you didn't get any input or to help you develop in that area. It was all about what you'd written about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it seems like, yes, you answer only for what you have written. So actually, yes, the point about assessment, I think, is the most important and a very tricky one, because this is exactly the question we are asked when we come with this suggestion. Why don't we try this?
Yeah.
And is, okay, how are you going to assess 50% and the other 50%? Because it seems like there is this imbalance, you know, between the way how we consider practice and actually and theory, and we've been, well, actually we talk about this practice and theory, but at the same time we do know that there is this kind of I don't know, concept when practice becomes research. Yes, and you do your research through practice because this is what you actually do. Yes, you just do research through practice, and then you write about that research.
Yeah. Can I just comment on that? Because I think, you know, nice to meet everyone again and hear also about other PhD by practice in the UK. I mean, obviously the benchmark for assessment is it a contribution to knowledge, right? So that's how you get a PhD or not. You're not even let in the gates unless you have some idea about what your contribution may be. And I think that for different times and in different formats, that contribution, well, does that contribution lie in the written thesis, or can the artwork be a contribution to knowledge? So that's the really difficult question. And or therefore does the practice comprise a contribution to methodology? And I was told that would be a really difficult claim to ever make, not by my own supervisory team, but by professors who supervise PhDs across the university. And I think that one of the things then I felt that was a challenge. So because my outcome as an exhibition proposal was a physical book, which if there's time or interest, I can share some images of that. But I felt that I revived an ancient practice of cutting up books, and I, you know, proposed this as a new way to devise exhibition ideas, and it was my own. But because it is transferable and somebody could adapt it, that was framed as one of the contributions. So you know, but yes, I still felt that at my defense, I had a hard time you know, articulating what is the contribution, and is there one overall one, or are there a number of small ones that are contributions to the different disciplines that the project engaged with. So I think that's, you know, those of you doing PhDs by practice, or you know, living in the space of having to answer these questions, you know, I think I'd love to hear how others are being advised about contributing to knowledge, and that even the nature of knowledge in art and design research.
Absolutely, yes. There have been so many, you know, so many discussions about the nature of knowledge. If you know, if you know, research into art can be even classed as you know, part of discipline, as a discipline, as a academic discipline. But I'd like to get back to this idea of contribution, because again, a contribution is a very could be very subjectively, you know, seen, because what is classed as contribution. So this is what we're struggling in fact, yes, because normally when you do your academic work, your contribution is counted by publications. But when it comes to art and design, it's not always about publications. Let's be honest. Very often it's about projects, it's about exhibitions, and this is when we had actually hard time with my colleagues Irina and Tatiana, who are here, when we had to, you know, to kind of write a certain text, you know, to show that contribution could be different, because we do look at practice as research. And I'd like to give floor to Irina, who will speak a little bit at length about this idea. Irina, да, прошу.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much. I thank the colleagues for engaging. I, as an academic researcher, am interested in exploring the formative practical research. In Russia, the education is still rather conservative. And what the School of Design is doing is absolutely novel to our education area and sphere. It is the only one that is pioneering this practical research. Of course, still we have a lot of questions, and a lot of questions have arisen. And I personally have a lot of questions. What Gina's been talking about, that what Claire has spoken about, the element, what is the conceptual part and the practical part, and what roles do they play? Because for us, a practicing researcher is something very hard to define. We went through a lot of literature, and I figured out that practice as research, or is that a research within the practical project? So all the definitions seem to be very unclear so far, and we don't know what is better to use. Then also I am concerned, and as you've mentioned, with the methodology of grading such research, because there is certain research matrix or framework, and it should be based on creative competencies. And I think Claire has mentioned that a lot of people have underestimated the creativity and the creative part. And I think it is really the most important in what we do. Another area that I'm interested in as a researcher myself is the format that the theoretical and methodological focus should have. How do we document the object of research? Is there a repository of this object, of images or video formats, of interdisciplinary representations? So all of that seems to be yet unresolved, unsettled. Of course, there is the research excellence framework, and it is important for evaluating the results of the research or the results of professors. And yet, this creative work is really hard to evaluate. And there are various formats for bringing together the concepts, the theories, and the practical projects. Therefore, when we're speaking about such a format as PhD by practice or practice as research, we are always faced with astonishment. And of course, for us, it is very important to share our personal experience, what you yourself had to face, what you yourself have decided to do, whether you found the strategies that you find correct and useful, and some formats that are useful. Thank you so much.
Shifting to English, it seems like Claire would like to add and somehow comment to this question, which or a series of questions which Irina has just posed as an illustration what it looks like PhD by practice. And there is very active chat box. Jenna says yes, that there is also distinction between practice-based or practice-led art and design research. So there are different formats, and it seems like the more projects, the more formats we have. And also the Journal for Artistic Research is an excellent open access peer-reviewed repository for cross-disciplinary artistic research. Yeah, thank you. And Claire, would you like to share slides?
I would. I have a number of slides.
Well, just a few of them.
But I'll do it really quickly, but I think some of these answer those questions. So the structure of my PhD basically split into 3 years. I'm being funded by the HRC, so the Arts and Humanities Research Council, which allows me to study full-time. And I never applied to do a PhD for the sake of the qualification. It was because what I was working on is kind of time critical, and I just wanted more time to be able to work on this project, which is I've been basing my research in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and currently I'm working with the babushkas who still live within the exclusion zone. So in year one, it's pretty much the same for all PhD students, but if you're practice-based with the addition of creative works. So it's a lot of reading around your subject generally, making connections, setting up participants, depending on what it is that you're looking at. And then in year two, so this past year, I've defined my focus because there's so many threads to what I could have done. And it's now about continuing connections. And through making, I have kind of aligned my practice work with theory. And I think that's kind of one of the most important things within this kind of structure. So here is a picture of my sketchbook. So I will always start working in my sketchbook after reading around. There's some information there about what practice-based research is. And as Jenna said, it's about contribution to knowledge, and you can do that through your theoretical work as well as your practice-based work. And on that subject, I've been advised that your contribution to knowledge is something that no one else has done, but it can be really, really small in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, so I've combined my practice with the theory from the beginning, and I think this is a really useful thing to do because when it comes to writing up, I have all the information there. So I use a sketchbook, and here it was at the very beginning of my project. I was just putting in images, photographs that I'd taken, but then thinking what words relate to this artwork. So I gave each page some keywords that you can see there on the right. Yeah, so my work when I was going to Chernobyl in person was about connecting through the making, and I stitched together with some of these wonderful old ladies. And then when I couldn't go and visit them last year because of the pandemic, I had to think of some other way of connecting with them. And it was that process of making things that determined what my focus for the whole PhD actually was. And it's about the process and the thinking. So it's about the thinking through making, but also verbalizing that and being able to explain. So it's quite emotional. And I think the relationship between practice and theory can kind of be seen here. So you look at what it is you're researching and documenting, which is a dying community in essence, but also its history, lost culture and lost textiles in terms of embroideries. So I was looking at themes such as loss, but within this, I identified what techniques and materials I could use to show that through the piece of artwork. So for example, I was looking at negative space, silhouettes, shapes, empty spaces, but also within the textiles kind of frame, unraveling, cutting out, unpicking, taking away things like colour and print and what kind of look I wanted to give it. And this was when I kind of started looking at their vernacular religious culture. So this is an example from a sketchbook page and a sample of embroidery on the right of where I've kind of disassociated the headscarf, and I've written about why I did that. Initially, it was because of an empty icon cover that I saw in a museum in Kiev, which evoked strong feelings of loss. And that's how I felt about the loss of connection with my subjects. And that kind of leads to literature and scholarly research that you can then research and look at and find out where there's a gap that you can fill. I know I'm the only person who's interested in working with the women with the embroideries. And I've had many kind of visits there, which is how I've built up relationships. And my PhD has become more about the relationships than the embroidery. So I've tried to kind of instill that into my work by various methods. So while making, you really need to be asking yourself, why am I doing this? How am I doing this? Why am I using the materials I'm using? And what's the message that I want to get across? So here I was visualizing the babushkas as icons because of how much I feel about them. And that led to me being able then to research further the religion within the zone and how it actually linked to the disaster in terms of their beliefs and how it was a prophecy, etc. So I think the artworks and the theory are very much interlinked. I'll really go quickly here, but basically to connect with them, I decided I wanted to write them a letter, get that translated. I had to get it to the zone, which is not an easy feat, but with contacts in Kiev and the zone, I did manage to get some work there. So I made individual icons for them in the traditional sense of these are very similar to the domestic icons that hang in their homes. And they would be able to understand that, and they would know that I had made them, which gave it an added kind of personal meaning. And it became all about gifts. So the framing of my PhD, my thesis, will be gift giving. So Mauser's theory has kind of an effect throughout all of my work. And I found that out by doing my traditional literature review. So yeah, but also there's notions of, I felt that I was caring for them, doing this work about them. So the work originally was with them, then it became about them, then it became a way to connect with them, and now I'm making work for them. So I'm videoing, I'm sending kind of videos of me stitching, particularly this one of Valentina, to Valentina. And I have promised that the next time I'm able to visit, I will take that work with me. So that has become kind of a methodology as well. But the methodologies, in answer to one of the previous questions, have all come about through making and doing the practice-based aspect and working with the women, and then kind of the thinking about it. There's a lot of thinking. But all of these methodologies and kind of theories are what I will be dipping into and using in my PhD. And I'll stop now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for this illustration, yes, which shows us probably the technologies of how PhD by practice can be done. Well, it can be done in different ways, but in fact, it really shows us the actually power of of making as a research tool. And I'd like to actually address my next question to Olga Roginskaya, who is with us today, because we spoke about this dual nature and necessity of presence of theories and practices of making and research when we discussed the potential structure of MA in theater and performance. So we are not only talking about PhD today, yes, we are talking about rethinking the whole structure of education in art and design. Just thinking not only about introducing more practice onto the PhD level, but actually introducing more theory probably into MA level and BA level. But I'd like, yes, to give floor to Olga just to comment a little bit on this. Thank you.
Здравствуйте, коллеги. Да, мы начинаем...
Hello, dear colleagues. We are launching a project on creating and implementing the MA programs that is called Theatre and Performance. It is a university program for the Russian context, and it is the context that I would like to talk about today. It will be really interesting as well to hear your responses and comments, especially when they come from universities in other academic contexts in other countries, whether these problems exist where you are based. We beginning this project is called Theatre and Performance. It is an MA program. This program and launching it was quite risky. Why? Because at the School of Design at the High School of Economics, the contemporary art practice department is something really ambitious and even provocative in the Russian context. I personally fully support it, but I also fully understand that there are risks, and yet there is a need for this kind of program. And I understand that it would have an added value. Speaking about the Russian situation, here practice and research are absolutely separated. They exist in different fields. In Russia, that is due to the Soviet education system and also some new dimensions that emerged in early 20th century, as well as professional context that students were brought up in. There were professional writers, professional directors, professional artists in the Soviet Union. A lot of that has been preserved. There are a lot of professional universities. They teach the techniques, they teach specific skills that could be later incorporated in the professional area. I myself am a theater specialist, so I'm going to give examples from this area. There are theater critics who specialize in the history of art, but theater history is still not an academic area, because here you can at least work with archives, with memoirs, with testimonies, or we can call it a collective memory. This is something really descriptive and positivist as regards its methodology. The inability to break away from this and to use a more contemporary approach is linked to the history of theater as a professional area, because the researcher continues to service this particular field, in this case, theater. And any kinds of specialized fields within theater are, we can say, politically partisan, because they have already certain politics built into them. And this sort of political engagement and the inclusion of this institution into politics and art and culture today set the conditions for the quality and the contents of what is written about theater and the theatrical process. There are some artistic fields that are luckier, for instance, cinema, because a lot of philosophers, philologists, linguists, academic researchers, historians wrote about cinema, and it seems there is no such a big gap between the good quality research about cinema and the practice of cinema and filmmaking. This gap is a lot narrower than what the one that exists in theater, between theater and theater criticism, or even painting there, and also literature. To write books, you have to go to one particular institution, and to analyze writing, you'll have to go to a different institution, and you never meet. So I myself, as a researcher and as a teacher at the humanitarian faculty, and I worked with theater, and I can give an example from my own experience. They're really high quality works written by people who study at a university, but they faced a certain void. They were not in demand within theater. These works were written by a language that theater people couldn't read. Today, I think we already spoke about these different languages, and that is something that is taken painfully. The students from universities, those who are vested in theater, were not allowed within the theater itself because there was a niche for them. They only could take the stance of an emancipated viewer, and I think we still are facing this problem. We bring our ideas, when we are trying to bring our ideas inside the theater process, we're only taking a stance of emancipated spectators or experts. But within this environment, they have their own expertise, and it is in demand. Why? Because this is the language that is closer to the people who work within the theater speak. This is the way the situation looks in theater right now, and for other areas, I think it is even worse. There might be some centers for contemporary art, there might be some schools, but it's not done within universities. There can't be a BA or MA in contemporary art except for the School of Design and the Higher School of Economics. So that's why I think that, once again, let me highlight that the most painful issue here is that whether there is demand within the professional sphere for the research that we do. Because if there is a lack of this interest, then there is this glaring gap, and we'll only have some really dramatic personal stories. Either researchers stop or they begin practicing. I have examples when there were really bright students who just went to do theater, to practice theater instead of researching. And they also got an advantage because they had good education and they had this fundamental knowledge, but they didn't continue with their research. So they sort of go into one environment without carrying out any research. They begin to speak a different language. So I myself have been following closely a biography of one of my students. That's what she did. She sort of lost her scientific language that she used. She got completely absorbed by this professional area where this professional language is not in demand. And on the other hand, there are these closed doors. And since there is no demand, you don't have a niche and no context where this dialogue is possible. So this is one problem. And the other one, I think it was mentioned by Liudmila, and I will cover it more briefly.
I will try to comment on the second issue. If you are a researcher and you are researching any kind of artistic practices, you have to be familiar with the practice itself. And here there is quite a challenge, at least for Russian universities. It's the necessity for financing. You have to understand what is the technique of making theater. You cannot know the technique of the theater being an emancipated spectator. You cannot do theater fully. You cannot be analytically potent without the material base. For the research programs inside the universities, this physical side of the field is one challenge that should be at least faced. Some of the examples, of the good examples, are there, but there needs to be collaboration between students and universities in Russia, and we have some good examples here, gladly, but I'd say this should be a third point of my speech if we're talking about the contemporary art sphere. It is obvious that there is a demand, maybe not from the Russian side, but from the global community, there is a demand on the theoretically charged artists. Of course, contemporary artist, contemporary director, contemporary performer cannot exist without theoretical language. There's been quite discussions recently about contemporary director and its their figure, and there were some discussions on a Russian director saying that in the Russian context, directors do not read enough. They do not have this theoretical resource that enable them to theorize their practical activity. Recently, we had a discussion with the colleagues from the Russian Academy of Theatre Arts. They were deploring that there's a lot of young theater directors who present very bad and very unclear theoretic conceptions, and it is closely related to the content of the theater academy, of the content of their education. And of course, from all the sides, we feel the need to marry theory and practice. But when we face more precise examples of collaboration, there's quite a lot of traditions that it is hard to ignore, and we do not know how to change the current situation. We'll see what happens with our project. But of course, the reflection and the practice related to it on this situation, the impulse to change the situation to make it more theoretical, to marry theory and practice. We will do it. We will try doing it. Thank you very much, and I will be speaking Russian for a while because we will be discussing this collaboration issue and the quest for the common language in our PhD school. We have a lot of situations when a practitioner comes with the aim to do theoretic research. So this is an opposite situation, and whether it can be efficient and productive, we'll see. We'll have two examples here. My first question is to Tatiana Fadeeva. She directs successfully several research projects, and particularly she directs Yulia Blucher's project, and Tatiana describes in very interesting terms the discussions they have with their colleagues and the discussions they have about the work. And I'm interested not in the concept maybe, but more in the language, and do they manage to find the common grounds here. And please, Tatiana, I hope you will tell it in more details based on your example of these collaboration. Thank you for this great opportunity and for this
релевантно вот именно по отношению к той теме, которую мы сегодня затрагивали. И хотелось бы это осветить уже с точки зрения...
I would like to present you our intuitions, our insights, our reflections on the subjects. I would like to share our experience of the synergy of the clash of the theory and practice, and Julia is here with us in the conference. I would like to share my screen and to present the results of our common struggle.
Юля, с одной стороны, аспирантка нашей аспирантской школы по искусству и дизайну.
So Julia
Дизайна, Высшей
is
школы
a
экономики.
student of our PhD school. At the same time, she teaches at the Higher School of Art and Design and the Higher School of Economics, and she's my colleague, and I'm very happy to be the director of her research. So she's more of a practitioner, I'm more on a theoretic side, and it's a very interesting collaboration professionally and human-wise. And we've been studying what you see now on the screen. It's an immersive illustration, 360 degrees illustration.
На английском языке
It is a completely new subject. There are no sources in Russian, only in English, and these are only case-based studies. So we did not find enough theoretical sources, and we decided to make our own. Julia is presenting her works, and I'm only experimenting, and I'm very flattered to say that my works remind of Jackson Pollock, etc. But coming back to our subject, the practice enabled me, the theoretician, to trace the common ground of the 3D illustration and the linear perspective. You can see it now on the screen, and I'm not going deep into details, but our visual experience was organized using the linear perspective. It expressed our intuition on the harmonious order of our world, and our practice now enables us to put a
эту коробку конвертировать
subject into a box with full of linear perspectives and transforming the box into the sphere. We see the subject at the center as a focal point of the space. And when I expressed this insight to Julia, so I'm now coming to the mechanics of our communications, she said, I'm very interested but no, when in our practice, she said, this logic is not confirmed by the practice. You can see the difference of the 3D illustration and the flat illustration. And Julia, to illustrate her point, showed me the way how the errors and deformation works. So she supported my theoretic notion with her practice, and it enabled us to move further to promote our research, our common research. And I'm not going deeper into this part. I'm not going to describe in details what we do in our research, but I just wanted to give you this one example of how these collaboration between research and practice can be efficient and productive for both sides. We have reflection on how, why, and when, and what is the effect, and what are the conclusions. Are there any alternatives, and what are the perspectives, and what is the place of the research in the
поверяем.
in the broader perspective? And there's on the other side practice. We support the theory, or we break and we conceptualize the knowledge. We offer some methods and tools. That's what we
Даже не
did
понадобились ключи.
yesterday, and I guess we managed to track some people on our site without any cookies. And I'm hoping that some of the practitioners will be more interested in the 360 degrees illustration, and I hope it will broaden our perspective on the medium. And on the other side, I would like to offer the new discourse, and from the case study to come from the case study to the philosophy. There's no active and passive side in the research. We are not dealing with subject and object now. We discussed that a lot. Now we understand in the perspective of the new materialistic philosophy. We know that object has their own agency, and John Lowe writes about it, and many others. And these researchers outline the performativity of the research process. They offer insights on the new perspective of this kind of research. Julia made a picture, and we showed you just showed you a video. It's very hard to present 3D illustration in the slides. So this object, as demonstrated, then somebody would be interested, I hope, and we will attract new actors, now new researchers, and thus change the structure of our field, because the structure will be the result of the new relations formed, new interactions formed inside the field. This was one example of the efficient interaction between theory and practice that could be productive. We can give more examples. Even with Julia, we can present more. But if we're reflecting on the future of the humanities, then it could be a bright future. We see now that the development is more and more dynamic now. We've published a paper with my colleagues recently. The dynamic picture that we see includes knowledge, which can be a kind of a spring for further practical development. And it could be a great description for my field, but I guess for any other field as well. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm very honored and happy to share our small insights. Oh, thank you. And if Malevich had this kind of technologies, he would die of jealousy, I guess. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, that's true. That's funny, at least, you know. I have researchers all on doing this work. Maybe Julia would like to add something. She's the main actor. I'm just a theoretical worker. Yes, without your help, thank you very much for listening. Without your help, I would not be able to do that. I'm a practitioner, and I come from the Stiglitz Academy in St. Petersburg, and I witnessed a turning point in the development of the institution. And during the years 2000, we had to acquire a lot of knowledge, you know, on our own. We did only theoretical work at the institution, and today it is important for all the professionals to have multidisciplinary expertise and practical tools, and Tanya helped me and still helps me to have new perspectives as a student. For over 2 years that I've spent here, my practice has become more strong in terms of theory, in terms of research methodology, in terms of philosophy background. Today, all these aspects of the education are combined in the academy. And it is important to put these pieces into broader context, to have the larger picture, and addressing our present experience that we have in research of the GIF illustration. And my last year graduates who teach now at the BA and extracurricular programs, they come to me to asking me to adapt these new techniques of illustration to the new tools, to the new computer programs, and I hope that we will include our new techniques that we develop here with Tatiana into the last module of our studies and curriculum program. And I think this marriage of theory and practice enables us to involve new people and new minds into the new researchers, practitioners. It is said, do not read theory papers, and our aim is to bring together the old and the new research projects, to introduce students to the new knowledge acquisitions. It is the time of those who will come after us. Our students will come after us, and our aim is to combine the old and the new, and to transmit this new knowledge to these new generations so that they can continue it. Julia, thank you very much. Tanya, wonderful examples. And I like the point on the fun, on having fun for research. And it is the main point for me. The research has to be fun, no matter what you do, practice
Да, сказала про такую
or theory.
кросс-поллинацию,
And Julia said
такое распыление.
something about the cross-pollination, about the multidisciplinarity of the work, which results into the constant movement and discussions between different professionals. And Julia, as a professional of the software, projects her knowledge and bring it back into the discussion. I would like to address my next question to Alena Papina. As for Tatiana and Julia, it is about the dialogue of a researcher and a practitioner. Well, I hope very much that Julia is a theoretician and practitioner at the same time.
Третий год учится в аспирантуре по искусству и дизайну, собственно, пришел.
And she is in the third year of her art and design program, and I'm interested what Alena can tell us. She wanted to conceptualize and to structuralize her research, and I wonder how did it work for you for over these years? Did your inner research get the right to speak out loud? And what happens to your practice? Olga previously said that the theoreticians lose their language when they shift to practice. So I'm very happy to hear your feedback. And Alena just came back from her Swiss residence. And I hope that we will be able to speak just a little bit about residences. So Alena, please. Thank you very much for the invitation and the discussion, and I've been doing notes, and I wanted first to comment on something that I heard before. I will talk firstly about my background. I've been fortunate enough to have the basic background, theoretic background, Faculty of Journalism of the Moscow State University, and then I studied at the MA program at the Vaganova Ballet Academy. It's a unique program where we bring together theory and practice. Paper-wise, there is no dance artist notion there, but on practice, we are dance artists. We graduate as such, and the program is aimed to produce curators, creative producers, and practitioners, dance practitioners, and I guess all these roles are very pertinent in the field of contemporary art today. I also think that it is very hard to divide artists into different fields, because all of the people who are interested in the challenges and issues of contemporary art choose contemporary art in all of its different perspectives. I do dance and performance. When we ask if there is a demand in research in contemporary art and theater, well, I have experience of working at the Meyerhold Center in Moscow, and I observe a lot of people who do performance art and visual artists and theater artists, and I see that my colleagues publish guidebooks, and they engage into discussions on communicating with dead white males. That's what they do in academy, where you have to relate to Foucault and Lefebvre, otherwise your theory work won't be relatable. Even if they're not relevant for your work, so you have to remember all the professionals and all the icons just to be relevant. And Sigma published a guidebook published by several shining professors, and the Garage published one, and it's very interesting in terms of what happens now in the field of dance, performance, and theater, and the research. As for the practitioners who are not interested in conceptualizing, well, I'm one vivid example of an artist who has to conceptualize. You won't be able to get work if you don't conceptualize. Curators of the contemporary art institutions in Russia, they have almost the same background as you. They just chose to become more on the theory, to become theoretics, and these are people who combine artistic and research practice, and you cannot make a work if you want to be professional, right? Without having any theoretical background and body of work. And I think what's interesting, Irina spoke about that. As a practitioner, I very often see that this huge theoretic base of the art theory and art history, it does not always suit and fit our contemporary activity, because we are not as fundamental in contemporary art as they are in art theory and history, and we switch between genres. It is a challenge of fitting your work into a paradigm, into a fixed paradigm. It is a very acute problem. We are often perplexed because we feel like we do not have the right to practice something that has not been valued enough, and even especially when you're a young artist and you don't have the symbolic capital. As for the research, I think collaboration is a key aspect of the work for practitioners and theoretic researchers. Dance writers, dance dramaturgs, and dance practitioners work together. Tatiana Chizhikova and Anna Semyonova-Gans are one example. This is a challenge of the Russian Academy. It is very hard to match a practitioner and a director of the research because most often the director is more familiar with the academy. And the possibility of this love, which is necessary to produce a work, is optional, and it can bring difficulties into work, and it can kill the sense of fun and joy of the research.
That might enable the researcher, as Julia did, to find a good supervisor. And I think it is a difficult task. So it's hard to find this match. Yes, you sort of have to nurture it within yourself. I'm going to talk about the residencies as well. I, as an artist who also does research, needs a way to reflect on the cultural processes, even though I understand I really cannot go very deep into the projects that I do. I'm not an economist myself, and I am not vested in Marxist theory. And still, it is very interesting for me to explore this area. The work Female Gaze, that was a very personal work for me. I explored the queer issue, and I am not a researcher in feminism, so some of the issues that I raised were important to explore theoretically. I also have a background in journalism, and it seems that going deep into detail is something that journalists are not very used to, but sometimes it is important. The problem of knowledge and contribution to knowledge is interesting when we think about dance. If we think about Vaganova and classical ballet as the highest form of dancing art, they say that they did not transfer knowledge in writing, they transfer knowledge directly into the dancer's legs. Therefore, the need for the bodily practice is extremely important in that area. In Rochenko school, they stopped experimenting with performance and educational programs because people who move, they need a lot of time to spend with their body. And still, unfortunately, we only have 24 hours a day. And we also need some sleep, and it's really hard to distribute time between theory and practice. And in performance arts, that is extremely difficult. And for me personally, it is an important and a problematic issue. It all boils down to trying to balance these opposing forces. They're pulling in different directions. So you're trying to stick to the standards of the academic environment and still remain someone oriented towards practice. Here we can speak about different ways to make time for both things. That is possible in residencies. There can be art residencies or research residencies. I went twice to Zara, and it is a good way to explore through practice, because you need to provide artist talks, to give artist talks, work within labs, and this reflecting on your own practice is important, and it happens even with those people who are not working with theory directly. The artist talk is a way to relay knowledge, or having a seminar or a workshop. It is something that allows you to reassess your own methods and your experience. If we speak about such a residence as Pro Helvetia, I went to Switzerland and worked with archives there. I met a lot of interesting people there, and this residency wasn't very long, but it really produced good results. I managed to combine going to libraries, networking, making my own video works, and also, of course, exploring the culture and this, the country overall. Speaking about experimental educational programs, I am heading a workshop, and to me, this is very interesting. The program is free of charge. I try to select people who are interested in it and who like the format of residency. It might be that the program lasts for a week or 2 weeks. We go outside, we stay outside in the open air, we do camping. We have there are site-specific programs for dancing. I'm working with videos also. So we select the cross-disciplinary team. A lot of photographers come to our school. Also, we even had geographers. So all kind of people who want to learn something about movement, who like movement, who work with it, who like the new contemporary approaches to the body, and they are somehow professionally interested, or that they want to use this platform to launch their own project, or they want to experiment with teaching, because I allow the participants to self-organize. We discuss the education plan, but there is no strict framework for the project. This 10 days can be spent differently. So we come at a specific venue, we divide into groups, we think about the educational process that we want to have, how we are ourselves feeling, because all the intense educational programs seem to make people tired very fast because they're trying to speak about very different issues all at the same time, and our approach is more therapeutical. It is important to have respect for our mental resources and our physical resources. The last program, I haven't taken part in it personally, but I'd really love to do that once because of the epidemic. The Fulbright scholarships were not handed out. The Russian Office of Fulbright provides a number of relevant programs. There is a PhD program. You can spend an academic year or 9 months. There is certain research freedom. No, there are no supervisors. You have the access to archives. You have time to spend on your dissertation. And to me, that seems very relevant. It is because in Moscow, it would be impossible to have a scholarship or a grant without being a professional researcher beginning at 18. There is also the visiting research student. So the program I spoke about was the visiting research program, and another one is the visiting scholar program. It is targeted at those who can teach. The duration is from 3 to 9 months. You cooperate with a university and you have a supervisor assigned. The person needs to propose a research plan and then apply to the program and teach at an institution that is ready to take you in. So these are the various program formats that there are. Yes, they are very nice programs, but you can do research in many places in Moscow as well. And even if you have to do something else, a lot of people do that, of course, and a lot of them like that. Of course, all of the formats you mentioned are great. It's great that they exist. And I think the talk that we had today was aimed at exploring various formats and languages. I think, Alena, you yourself spoke about matching with your supervisor, and of course, a good match is always means that you speak the same language, that you like working with each other, and that is a bliss. We have just a few minutes left. Katya, are you still with us? I hope she is. She's there with her son, I guess. But there was a question that I had to you. It's the art forum where you yourself were a curator, and it's an interesting combination within art and design, and this is something that we see very often. Can you tell us about it? Yeah, I'll try to do that. Thank you very much. This is really interesting. There were so many interesting ideas. Yes, I have a young man with me, and if he begins to scream, I'll have to turn off my mic. I'm so sorry. I'm going to turn off my screen and I'm going to tell you about working in the north of Russia for that I've been doing for the past 4 years. Katya, sorry, I know that we have how many minutes left? 5, yes, so you have to be really brief. Well, to remind about the context, I grew up in Arkhangelsk, the north of Russia. I had my own experimental workshop. We had a humanities faculty that was established in the 90s, and I got my education in Arkhangelsk. Later on, I went for my BA at Oslo University, and I had one of the teachers who already delivered for us today. In 2014, I decided to come back to the north of Russia to regain my knowledge, because there is the circulation of knowledge, and it is really, really important because we need to take into account geography. Oslo and other capitals have really little knowledge about the Arctic. And in the north, people know very little and what is happening in the capital. In the Arctic, the issues of climate change are very important and they are felt there in a very tangible way. So what happened and what's been happening in the north? The archives are becoming digitalized. We can now have an access to resources that were unavailable before. And it allows us to recreate our own identity. And it is important not only for the people who live in the north. There are projects, for instance, in Cuba, where there is an urge to reassess one's own identity, because we all learned history from history books that were written somewhere not in the north, not in the far north. Walter Mignol or Andy Lastan, there is a saying that concepts are produced by people. So why these concepts were produced and who produced them? Why people who live in the north have never seen these photographs that were taken in 1906? Arctic Art Forum provides the documentation of the research process. Since there was no contemporary art in the north, we had to create our own language. We had even to forget about the contemporary aspect of art. So we needed to combine art, dancing, and music, because there were artists who came visiting. They came from Norway, Finland, and then there are some locals. There is the local choir on the picture. And I think what they do is something that has preserved the ancient practices, dancing and singing. This is the picture from the performance that we had at the city center, where there is no memory. This is the city that was destroyed, and we had to try to regain it through practice and artistic research. Now you're speaking about language. Conceptual art would not work in the north, that's what we thought. Street art, on the other hand, is something that could be used and that we worked a lot with. We engaged 3 young to-be artists, street artists, who made the work that you see in the picture. This is the picture of the residency. Artist Natalia Kuzmina, she came to this area. She met some textile specialists. We made an exhibition in a space that we found because there are no contemporary art institutions. We found a library with an interesting space and we managed to use it. The director of this library supported us, and it was a great thing because there are not so many people who are interested in contemporary art there. So we had this interesting research experience and we tried to reconsider Soviet experience. Once again, the language was important in the project that we made. It was the weaver of sounds. So here you can see that the artist is weaving the sounds in. We are also inviting different artists like Ustina Yakovleva to take part. She's one of the artists who came to collaborate with us. She's a sound artist. She's a Grammy-nominated artist. This is the project that she made because of the residency. She met the local women there and she found this really interesting material, and this material was very crucial to her. I am in Oslo right now, a bit closer to the south now. But what is happening here in contemporary art? A lot of attention is given to discussions and theoretical debates. And it is something that could not happen in Arkhangelsk. And the last aspect is also the residency, but also the work with archives. Archives have not been studied by the researchers at the local university. A big company, the White Sea patterns, they are producing handmade materials. But if we compare that to IKEA, which is a lot more practice-oriented, and they sell it, there they made souvenirs. So this enterprise was primarily working with making and producing souvenirs. There are a lot of departments at the university in Arkhangelsk, but they still do not have a good work, a good supervision of research and archives. In summer, this July, we are going to host yet another summer school that will be dedicated to reconsidering the ancient identity. This is one of the artists. Her name is Alena and she is working with this new images or new identity of the North. She's made this costume based on the important architectural form for the North, which is the form of a blade. I think you might find her work and the results of this work at exhibitions. Now, taking stock of what I've said, I think that a theory and practice matching different languages is extremely important. It is crucial here. When I graduated from Oslo University, I figured that was very important because I myself deal primarily with academic studies and research, not so much with practice. And then yet another issue is the proliferation of knowledge. How does the knowledge spread? What are the ways for it? And the last aspect is creating this meeting points where one can learn by doing. So if there is a need for knowledge, it can be acquired through making and doing. Within our projects that we had in the north, we just studied and researched the environment, and that allowed us to produce new meanings. I don't have a PhD on that, but I have a lot of material to write about this. I think to have and produce a theory that is not supported by practice and is not changed through practice would be not so interesting. So I would really like to implement that aspect. You've spoken about some very important issues. You said that your PhD in this area cannot be restricted to theory alone. And I think it is not only in your case, but it would be applicable to everybody else. Unfortunately, we won't hear everybody tell their stories, but the cross-working, so working across various areas, exploring links between theory and practice, between different aspects and between different areas of knowledge. It seems that it would take us a very long time. We always try to set ourselves a certain time limit, and we always succeed it. It means that we need to continue this lively discussion, and of course we should not limit ourselves to the discussions alone. So let's have this practice through making that can be translated to initiating and launching new projects and formats. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, for giving us an opportunity to take a glimpse at your personal experience in the areas of your interest. I hope that this discussion will continue. And here we are not yet finishing the work of our conference, because this is the forum where theory and practice merge.